On June 25, 2009, the world lost one of the most famous entertainers in history. News outlets across the globe interrupted regular programming with a breaking story: Michael Jackson, the king of pop, had died at the age of 50. For millions of fans, the announcement felt impossible to believe. Just weeks earlier, Jackson had been preparing for a highly anticipated comeback. After years away from large-scale touring, he was getting ready to perform a series of concerts in London known as This Is It. The shows had generated enormous excitement. Tickets sold rapidly, rehearsals were underway, and many believed the concerts would mark a new chapter in Jackson's career. Then, without warning, everything came to a stop. According to official records, emergency responders were called to Jackson's rented home in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Holmby Hills during the afternoon of June 25. When paramedics arrived, they found the singer unresponsive. Despite extensive efforts by emergency personnel and later by doctors at a nearby hospital, Michael Jackson was pronounced dead that day. Almost immediately, questions began to surface. How could a global superstar who was actively rehearsing for major performances suddenly die? Was his death the result of natural causes? Did underlying health issues play a role? Or was something else happening behind the scenes? At first, many reports focused on the possibility of cardiac arrest. But investigators quickly realized that determining the true cause of death would require a much deeper examination. As authorities began collecting evidence, they discovered something unusual. Jackson's final days involved extensive medical care, prescription medications, and the constant presence of a personal physician. That physician was Dr. Conrad Murray. At the time, Murray was responsible for monitoring Jackson's health as preparations for the This Is It concerts intensified. In the days following Jackson's death, investigators would begin scrutinizing Murray's actions, his medical decisions, and the events that unfolded inside the singer's bedroom. What they uncovered would transform a tragic death into one of the most closely examined celebrity investigations in modern history. And the deeper investigators looked into Michael Jackson's final hours, the more troubling the questions became. Michael Jackson's death was initially reported as a medical emergency. But when investigators reconstructed the final 24 hours of his life, they discovered a timeline filled with medications, unanswered questions, and decisions that would later be examined in a courtroom. What exactly happened inside that house before paramedics arrived? By the summer of 2009, Michael Jackson was preparing for what many believed would be one of the biggest comebacks in music history. His upcoming This Is It concert series at London's O2 Arena had attracted enormous public attention. Originally planned as a limited run, the demand for tickets was so high that additional shows were added. Rehearsals were taking place almost daily, and Jackson was heavily involved in the creative process. But behind the scenes, there were growing concerns about his health. According to testimony and evidence later presented during investigations and court proceedings, Jackson had long struggled with insomnia. Sleep had become a serious issue for him, particularly as the pressure of preparing for the concerts increased. People close to the production described an intense schedule. Rehearsals often lasted for hours, and expectations surrounding the comeback were enormous. However, it is important to separate fact from speculation. While many observers later suggested that stress may have affected Jackson's condition, there is no definitive evidence proving that rehearsal pressure alone caused the events that followed. What is known is that on June 24, 2009, Jackson attended another rehearsal at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Video footage from that evening shows him practicing songs and dance routines with his team. Several individuals who saw him that night later reported that he appeared engaged and focused on the upcoming performances. After the rehearsal ended, Jackson returned to his residence in Holmby Hills. Also present at the home was his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray. According to Murray's later statements to investigators, Jackson continued to have difficulty sleeping during the night. Over the following hours, various medications were administered in an effort to help him rest. Exactly what happened during those early morning hours would become one of the most important questions in the entire investigation. By the next afternoon, emergency responders would be rushing to the residence. And soon, investigators would begin examining not only what medications had been given, but whether they had been administered safely and appropriately. The answers would lead authorities toward a powerful anesthetic rarely associated with home treatment, and a decision that would forever change the course of the case. Investigators now had a timeline. They knew who was with Michael Jackson during his final hours. But the next discovery was far more alarming. Evidence suggested that a powerful hospital-grade drug had been used inside a private bedroom. Why was it there, and who authorized its use? As investigators worked to reconstruct Michael Jackson's final hours, one question quickly moved to the center of the case: what exactly caused his death? The answer would emerge through forensic testing and the findings of the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. Months before June 2009, Michael Jackson had reportedly been struggling with severe insomnia. According to evidence later presented in court, he often complained that he could not get proper sleep. Finding a solution had become a major concern, especially as preparations for the demanding "This Is It" concert series continued. But what investigators discovered was not a typical sleep treatment. The toxicology report revealed the presence of a powerful anesthetic called Propofol in Jackson's system. Propofol is not an ordinary sleeping medication. It is a drug primarily used in hospitals and surgical settings to induce and maintain anesthesia. Patients receiving Propofol are typically monitored with specialized equipment by trained medical professionals because the drug can significantly affect breathing and heart function. The discovery immediately raised concerns among investigators. Why was a surgical anesthetic being used inside a private residence? How had it been administered? And were proper medical safeguards in place? As authorities searched for answers, attention increasingly focused on Dr. Conrad Murray. According to Murray's statements and later court testimony, Jackson had repeatedly sought relief from his chronic insomnia. Murray acknowledged administering Propofol to Jackson in the weeks leading up to his death. However, the circumstances surrounding its use would become a major point of controversy. Prosecutors would later argue that the environment in which the drug was administered lacked essential medical protections. During the trial, evidence was presented regarding monitoring equipment, emergency preparedness, and the standards normally associated with the use of Propofol. These issues became central to the investigation. Importantly, investigators were dealing with facts, not theories. The toxicology results confirmed the presence of Propofol. The question was no longer whether the drug had been involved. The question was whether its use amounted to criminal negligence. As forensic evidence continued to accumulate, authorities reached a conclusion that dramatically changed the direction of the case. Michael Jackson's death would not be officially classified as natural causes. Instead, the ruling would trigger a criminal investigation that placed his personal physician directly under the spotlight. And once detectives began examining what happened after Jackson stopped breathing, the scrutiny surrounding Dr. Murray intensified even further. The toxicology report had identified the drug. But investigators still needed to determine what happened inside the bedroom when Michael Jackson's condition suddenly deteriorated. The timeline that emerged would become one of the most debated pieces of evidence in the entire case, and it would ultimately decide whether a crime had been committed. As investigators pieced together the events of June 25, 2009, they focused on a critical period of time, the moments before emergency services were called. At first, the public knew only that Michael Jackson had suffered a medical emergency. But behind the scenes, detectives, forensic experts, and prosecutors were carefully reconstructing a timeline based on physical evidence, medical records, phone logs, and witness testimony. According to Dr. Conrad Murray's statements to investigators, he had been with Jackson during the morning hours as the singer struggled to sleep. Murray later told authorities that he had administered Propofol and then briefly left Jackson's bedside. When Murray returned, he said he found Jackson unresponsive. From that point forward, nearly every action taken inside the room would become a subject of intense scrutiny. Prosecutors later argued that Murray failed to meet accepted medical standards in multiple ways. During the trial, experts testified about the importance of continuous monitoring when administering a drug like Propofol. They also discussed the emergency equipment that would normally be available in a medical setting. Investigators examined whether those safeguards were present in Jackson's bedroom. Another key issue involved the emergency response itself. Court testimony revealed questions about how quickly help was summoned after Jackson's condition worsened. Phone records, witness statements, and medical evidence were all analyzed in an effort to determine exactly what happened during those crucial minutes. The prosecution argued that valuable time may have been lost. The defense disagreed, maintaining that Murray had attempted to help his patient and never intended harm. As the investigation progressed, medical experts reviewed toxicology reports and the circumstances surrounding the administration of Propofol. Their findings played a major role in determining how Jackson's death would ultimately be classified. Then came a turning point. In August 2009, the Los Angeles County coroner officially ruled Michael Jackson's death a homicide. The term homicide, in this context, did not automatically mean murder. It simply meant that the death resulted from the actions of another person rather than natural causes. Still, the ruling dramatically changed the course of the case. Authorities were no longer examining only a tragic death. They were now investigating potential criminal responsibility. And as prosecutors prepared their case, attention shifted toward one question that would dominate headlines around the world. Did Dr. Conrad Murray's actions amount to criminal negligence? The coroner had ruled Michael Jackson's death a homicide. Now investigators had to answer an even bigger question. Was this a tragic medical mistake, or had Dr. Conrad Murray's decisions crossed the line into criminal conduct? The answer would be decided in a courtroom watched by millions around the world. By early 2010, the investigation into Michael Jackson's death had moved beyond forensic analysis and medical reports. It was now becoming a criminal case. Following months of investigation by the Los Angeles Police Department and prosecutors, Dr. Conrad Murray was formally charged with involuntary manslaughter. The charge did not accuse him of intentionally killing Michael Jackson. Instead, prosecutors argued that his actions and medical decisions showed criminal negligence and directly contributed to the singer's death. The case immediately attracted worldwide attention. For many people, the trial represented more than a legal proceeding. It was an attempt to understand how one of the most famous entertainers in history had died while under the care of a physician. When the trial began in 2011, prosecutors presented a detailed timeline of Jackson's final hours. They relied on expert testimony, toxicology evidence, phone records, and medical documentation to support their argument. Central to the prosecution's case was the use of Propofol. Medical experts testified that Propofol is intended for use in controlled medical environments and requires close monitoring because of its potential effects on breathing and cardiovascular function. Prosecutors argued that the conditions inside Jackson's bedroom fell far short of those standards. The defense presented a different interpretation. Murray's attorneys argued that the doctor had been trying to help a patient suffering from severe insomnia. They challenged portions of the prosecution's timeline and disputed claims regarding responsibility for the fatal outcome. Over several weeks, jurors heard testimony from doctors, investigators, emergency responders, and medical specialists. One of the most powerful moments came when prosecutors played an audio recording of Michael Jackson speaking while apparently under the influence of medication. The recording became a widely discussed piece of evidence and highlighted concerns about his medical condition during the weeks before his death. After reviewing the evidence, the jury reached its verdict. On November 7, 2011, Dr. Conrad Murray was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The verdict marked a major milestone in the case. Yet even after the conviction, many questions remained unanswered. Because while the court had determined legal responsibility, public debate about the larger circumstances surrounding Michael Jackson's death was only beginning. And soon, attention would shift beyond the courtroom toward theories involving the music industry, financial pressures, and the intense demand surrounding Jackson's planned comeback. The jury had delivered its verdict, and Dr. Conrad Murray was convicted. But for many observers, the case still felt incomplete. Why had Michael Jackson become dependent on such extreme sleep treatments in the first place? To answer that question, investigators and journalists began examining the enormous pressures surrounding the biggest comeback of his career. With Dr. Conrad Murray convicted of involuntary manslaughter, the legal case had reached a conclusion, but for many observers, another question remained. How had Michael Jackson arrived at a point where a powerful anesthetic like Propofol was being used to help him sleep? To understand that question, it is necessary to look at the months leading up to his death. In March 2009, Michael Jackson announced a series of concerts at London's O2 Arena. The event, titled This Is It, was presented as a major return to the stage after years away from large-scale touring. The response was immediate. Demand for tickets was enormous, and additional shows were added to meet public interest. What began as a limited engagement eventually expanded into a lengthy concert schedule that would require months of preparation. Jackson and his team began intensive rehearsals. Video recordings from those rehearsals show him working on choreography, stage effects, and musical performances. Witnesses involved with the production later described an artist deeply invested in the project and determined to deliver a memorable show. At the same time, concerns about his health continued to surface. Various accounts from people involved in the production described periods when Jackson appeared fatigued or struggled with sleep. However, it is important to distinguish documented observations from speculation. While numerous reports discussed his physical condition, investigators never concluded that rehearsal demands alone caused his death. What is documented is that insomnia remained a significant issue. Court records and testimony established that Jackson had been seeking ways to sleep for an extended period. This problem became a key factor in understanding why medications, including Propofol, were being administered in the weeks before his death. Following Jackson's death, some members of his family raised concerns about the pressures surrounding the upcoming concerts. Legal disputes later emerged involving concert promoter AEG Live and questions about responsibility for Jackson's medical care. However, after years of litigation, no court found that concert organizers were legally responsible for his death. The facts established in court remained focused on the actions of Dr. Conrad Murray. Yet public interest did not end there. As details of the case became widely known, a growing number of theories began circulating online. Some questioned whether larger forces were involved. Others wondered if important pieces of the story had never been uncovered. And those theories would keep the mystery alive long after the trial was over. The criminal case was closed, but public debate was far from over. As conspiracy theories spread across television, documentaries, and the internet, some people began asking a startling question: was Michael Jackson really the victim of negligence, or was there something more behind one of the most famous deaths in modern history? Years after Michael Jackson's death, the official findings remain unchanged. The Los Angeles County coroner ruled his death a homicide caused by acute propofol intoxication, combined with the effects of other sedatives. Dr. Conrad Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter for his role in the events that led to Jackson's death. Those are the established facts. But despite the court's verdict and extensive investigations, public debate never truly ended. One reason is simple: Michael Jackson was not an ordinary celebrity. By 2009, he was one of the most recognized figures on the planet. His influence extended far beyond music. He had sold hundreds of millions of records, built a global fan base, and remained the subject of intense media attention for decades. When someone of that stature dies unexpectedly, speculation often follows. Almost immediately after Jackson's death, numerous theories began circulating online and in the media. Some people questioned whether Dr. Murray had acted alone. Others speculated about the involvement of powerful figures within the entertainment industry. However, it is important to separate verified evidence from unproven claims. During the criminal investigation and subsequent legal proceedings, authorities found no evidence that a larger conspiracy was responsible for Michael Jackson's death. Law enforcement agencies, prosecutors, and the courts focused on the medical evidence and Dr. Murray's actions. Even so, certain theories continued to gain attention. One theory suggested that Jackson had powerful enemies because of his public criticism of parts of the music industry. Supporters of this theory often point to statements Jackson made about artist rights and record label practices during various periods of his career. Another theory claimed that financial interests surrounding the planned "This Is It" concerts created motives for foul play. Yet despite years of discussion, no credible evidence has emerged proving either claim. Investigators never announced findings supporting a conspiracy, and no additional individuals were charged in connection with Jackson's death. Still, for many fans, the unanswered questions remained frustrating. If the official explanation was correct, how had such a dangerous situation been allowed to develop in the first place? And if there was no larger conspiracy, why did so many people continue to believe there was? Those questions help fuel another theory, one that would become perhaps the most famous of all. A theory claiming that Michael Jackson never died at all. While conspiracy theories about the music industry attracted attention, another claim became even more widespread. According to some believers, Michael Jackson had staged his own death and disappeared from public view. But what evidence do supporters of this theory point to, and what do the facts actually show? Among the many theories that emerged after Michael Jackson's death, none became more widespread than the claim that he never died at all. More than a decade after June 25, 2009, videos, social media posts, and online forums continue to promote the idea that Jackson somehow staged his own death and disappeared from public life. For supporters of this theory, several points are often cited as evidence. Some point to alleged sightings of Jackson after 2009. Others focus on inconsistencies they believe exist in media reports from the day of his death. Certain internet users have analyzed photographs, videos, and public appearances by individuals they claim resemble Jackson. Over the years, these claims have generated millions of views online. But when examined against the available evidence, the theory faces significant challenges. First, Michael Jackson's death was investigated extensively by multiple agencies. Emergency responders, medical professionals, forensic experts, law enforcement investigators, prosecutors, and the courts all examined the circumstances surrounding his death. His autopsy was conducted by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, which documented its findings in detail. Toxicology testing identified the substances present in his system, and those findings became a central part of the criminal case against Dr. Conrad Murray. Second, Jackson's death certificate was officially issued, and his funeral and memorial events were attended by family members, friends, colleagues, and members of the public. Third, no verifiable evidence has ever surfaced showing that Jackson secretly survived after June 25, 2009. This does not mean the theory has disappeared. In fact, the lack of complete answers about certain aspects of Jackson's life has helped keep speculation alive. When a public figure leaves behind unanswered questions, people often search for alternative explanations. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as a natural reaction to loss. For many fans, accepting the death of someone who had been part of their lives for decades was difficult. As a result, theories continued to spread. But while rumors captured headlines, the legal and medical conclusions remained unchanged. Michael Jackson's death had been investigated, a physician had been convicted, and the official findings had not been overturned. Yet even today, one important question continues to divide public opinion. Was this simply a tragic case of medical negligence, or were there warning signs that should have been recognized long before June 25, 2009? The conspiracy theories may never disappear, but the final chapter of this story is not about rumors. It is about legacy, accountability, and the questions that remain unanswered even after years of investigations. In the end, what can we say with certainty about Michael Jackson's death, and what mysteries still remain? More than 15 years have passed since Michael Jackson's death, yet the case continues to fascinate people around the world. Part of that interest comes from who Michael Jackson was. Few entertainers have left a cultural impact on the scale that he did. His music, performances, and influence on popular culture transformed the entertainment industry. Decades after his rise to fame, his songs continue to be streamed, played on radio stations, and discovered by new generations of fans. But alongside that legacy exists another story, the story of his final days and the investigation that followed. Today, the official record is clear. The Los Angeles County coroner ruled Michael Jackson's death a homicide caused by acute propofol intoxication in combination with other sedatives. Following a highly publicized trial, Dr. Conrad Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter for his role in the events leading to Jackson's death. Those findings remain unchanged. No court has overturned the verdict. No credible evidence has emerged proving that Michael Jackson faked his death. And despite years of speculation, investigators never announced evidence supporting a larger criminal conspiracy behind his death. Yet even with those facts established, some questions continue to linger. How did one of the world's most famous performers become dependent on increasingly powerful methods to treat insomnia? Were there warning signs that people around him failed to recognize? Could different medical decisions have changed the outcome? And what responsibilities do physicians, employers, and support teams have when caring for individuals under extraordinary public and professional pressure? Those questions extend beyond Michael Jackson's story. They continue to influence discussions about celebrity health, prescription drug use, medical ethics, and the responsibilities of those entrusted with another person's care. In many ways, that may be why this case remains relevant today. Not because every mystery has been solved, but because it serves as a reminder that fame, wealth, and global success do not eliminate human vulnerability. On June 25, 2009, the world lost a performer whose influence shaped generations. The legal case has ended. The official findings remain in place. But for many people, the search for complete understanding continues. And perhaps that is why the story of Michael Jackson's final days remains one of the most discussed true crime and celebrity cases of the 21st century. The verdict has been delivered. The facts have been documented. Yet the conversation surrounding Michael Jackson's death continues, and may continue for years to come. What do you think? Was Michael Jackson's death solely the result of medical negligence, or are there still unanswered questions that deserve closer examination? Let us know your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime and unsolved mystery stories.